Call It Courage, Chapter 4, Part 5. Let's go ahead and get started. The canoe was finished and Mafatu lashed the tough purau outrig into place with hands that trembled. The woven sail was complete and ready, the rigging strong as wire. There it was all over. The boy could hardly wait to get his craft into the water. Placing logs under the curving stem, he gave a shove and a push, and the canoe stirred, moved forward, quick with life. Another shove, and the craft slid into the lagoon, and there it floated lightly, easily as a gull poised for flight. Mafatu stood back and surveyed it with shining eyes. He could hardly believe that all these weeks of labor were at an end. Suddenly he was quiet. With lifted head, he offered up the prayer with which all ships were launched at Hukaru. Tauro, mighty one, my thanks to you in this task completed, guided on your back to safe harbor. Tauro The boy leaped into the stern, picked up the paddle, and ran up the sail. Yuri sprang into the bow, yelping for very joy. Kiwi sailed far overhead on widespread wings. The breeze caught the sail, swelling it to a golden curve. The outrigger leaned at a sharp angle and sped ahead toward the distant reef. Spray flew back from the prow, and Mafatu's heart beat high. He let out the sheet, wrapped the sennit rope around his foot, and gripped the steering paddle with both hands. He was filled with pride in his canoe. Never had he been as happy as in this moment. Out toward the black reef, closer and closer, the canoe skimmed on the wide arc of speed. It was late afternoon and the sun was setting in a blaze of glory, but the boy was reluctant to turn back. He knew that he should have climbed to look out that morning. This was the first day he had neglected that duty, but the temptation to complete his canoe had been too great. Tomorrow at daybreak, he would climb the plateau for the last time, and then Hukaru. As the little craft skimmed out toward the barrier reef, the thunder of the surf increased in the volume to an overwhelming sound. Waves born far south in the Antarctic ice fields, the home of all waves, broke their backs upon the coral rampart. Gathering far out, they charged the reef. Seahorses were flinging manes of foam. The surf shot skyward, and above its mist, seagulls swooped and darted. The reef thunder no longer filled Mafatu with unease. He had lived too close to it these past days. Out here, half a mile from shore, detached from all security of land, he had come to believe that at last he established a truce with Maona, the sea god. His skill against the ocean's might, the boy skirted along the edge of the reef, lowered his sail and dropped overboard the lump of coral which served as an anchor. Then he took out his fish line and baited the hook with a piece of crab meat. He wanted to enjoy the full of this new sensation of confidence in himself, this freedom from the sea's threat. He looked back at the land fondly, but without longing. The high peak, purple in the waning light, stood somber against the sky. The valleys were shadowed with mystery. All these weeks he had lived close to this land and been grateful for its bounty, but he had been born on an atoll, a low island, and all his life had spent in the spaciousness of open sea and wind-swept palms. There was something gloomy and oppressive in this high island. The reef, this was a part of his heritage. The sea at last was as much his element as the land's. The realization flooded through him in a warm tide of content. He lowered his fish line, fastened it in the mid thwart, and looked deep down in the clear water. He saw a scarlet rock cod materialize, hang in the shadow of the canoe, motionless save for the slight movement of its gills. With a sudden flip of the tail, it vanished. How fantastic was the undersea world. The boy saw branching staghorn corals as large as trees, through which jellyfishes floated like a film of fog. He saw shoals of tiny mullet miniature arrows heads, the whole school scarcely larger than a child's hand. A conger eel drew its ugly head back within a shadowy cavern. Here beside the wall of reef, Mafatu's bamboo fish trap hung suspended. Before he returned to the shore, he would empty the trap. It had been undisturbed since the hammerhead was killed, and each day had yielded up a good supply of mullet or crayfish or lobsters. Here the wall of living coral descended to the lagoon. Its sides were pierced with caves of darkness, whose mystery the boy felt no desire to explore. Far below, perhaps 40 feet, the sandy floor of the lagoon was clear and green in the dappled light. A parrot fish emerged from the gloom, nibbled on Mafatu's bait, then vanished. Oh, these fish must be well fed. My piece of crab meat does not tempt them. The boy decided to give it up and content himself with the fish in the bamboo trap. He leaned over the gunwale and pulled it out of the water. Through the openings in the cage, he could see 3 lobsters, blue, green, and fat. What luck! But as he dragged the heavy, wet trap over the gunwale, the fiber cord that fastened his knife about his neck caught on an end of bamboo. The trap slipped, the cord snapped, the knife fell into the water. With a dismay, the boy watched it descend. It spiraled rapidly, catching the sunlight as it dropped down and down to the sandy bottom. And there it lay just under the edge of a branching staghorn. Mafatu eyed it uncertainly. His knife, the knife he had labored so hard to shape. He knew what he ought to do. He should dive and retrieve it. To make another knife so fine would take days. Without it, he was seriously handicapped. He must get his knife, but the reef wall looked dark and forbidding in the fading light. Its black holes were the home of the giant Fek, the octopus. The boy drew back in sudden panic. He had never dived as deep as this. It might be even deeper than he thought, for the clarity of the water confused all scale of distance. The knife looked so very near, and yet there it lay, gleaming palely. The boy gazed down at it with longing. He remembered the morning he had found the whale's skeleton, the first one he had seen. Surely Maui, the god of the fishermen, had sent the whale there to die for Mafatu's use. The long hours that had gone into making of the knife, it had saved Yuri's life too. And now Yuri in the bow of the canoe was looking at his master with eyes so puzzled and true. And Mafatu drew a deep breath. How could he abandon his knife? Would Maui, the thought chilled him, think him a coward? Was he still Mafatu, the boy who was afraid? He leaped to his feet, gave a brave hitch to his purau. Then he was overside in the water, clung for a moment to the gunwale, breathing deeply, inhaling, then releasing the air in the long-drawn whistle, he prepared his lungs for the pressure of the depths. Many times he had seen the pearl divers do it. In the canoe lay a coral weight fastened to a length of sennit. Mafatu took this weight and held the cord in his toes, and with a final deep breath, he descended feet first, allowing the weight to pull him downward. At about 20 feet, he released the weight, turned over, and swam for the bottom. Here the water was cool and green. The sunlight filtered from above in long, oblique bands. Painted fishes fled before him. He saw a giant purau, a small clam 5 feet across and taller than he, its open lips waiting to snap shut upon fish or man. Green fronds waved gently as if in some submarine wind. A shadow moved above the boy's head, and he glanced upward in alarm. Only a sand shark cruising harmlessly. An eel, like a cold waving ribbon, touched his leg and was gone. The knife, there it lay. How sharp and bright it looked. Now the boy's hands were upon it. He seized it and sprang upward toward the light. We'll end there, and we will find out in our next time what happens in this story.